All right, so if you remember back a little while ago, we used this ski footage that we had, and if I bring this back down, this was the original clip that we have. When I play it back, you can see that it's really smooth. Well, I went in and I edited that to make it a lot more shaky. And so if you see here, you can see that it looks like the camera's shaking all over the place. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply an effect to help that shaky footage. Now, you can't always get the footage exactly where it was in the beginning, but when you apply this effect, it's called the warp stabilizer, you can actually see the difference that it makes. And sometimes it will cut off edges of your video, or it might make your video look a little odd depending on how you use it. But for this one, I'm going to show you exactly what the effect will do. So if I go over to my effects and presets panel and I just start typing the word warp, you'll notice that it'll bring up anything that has the word warp in the effect. So I've got some animation presets, some distort presets, and then some other things. I'm going to use the warp stabilizer visual effects, or VFX. I'm going to drop it onto my layer here. Now what it's going to do is it's going to analyze this footage in the background, and you can see up here where it says initializing, and it's going to tell you what frame it's processed along with each one of these settings that I usually will leave at default and see how it handles the footage. Then you can go in and change these settings, which it will then analyze and allow you to look and see how that's working. So right now we're about at frame 60 of 300. It says I've got 1 minute remaining, and it's going to go through and analyze. Now the cool thing about this is I can go out of this back to my projects. I can open up another composition, or I can even work within this same composition and work on different settings adjustments if I'd like to while it's analyzing. So you don't have to wait for it to get done. And when you go back in, you can see that there's an effects drop down now in that layer, which will show all the effects that have been applied to the layer. So we've got the warp stabilizer. If I click this down, you can see it's still showing where it's analyzing the footage. I can also hit Shift and F3. Actually, let's go back out of here. We don't want to show that. Shift, how about, let's see what it is. The effects controls are just F3 while you're in here. So I'm going to get off of here and let's click on here and hit F3. Okay, that's what we're looking for, the effects controls. So now when we pull this up, you can see it's at 300. Now it's going to stabilize the footage, or do its best to do so. And when we play it back now, you can see that it's smoothed out the footage. If you're a Premiere Pro user, you know that there is a warp stabilizer you can use in there. The one in After Effects is much better. It renders the compositions much better, and you don't have to worry about trying to work so much with the settings, because After Effects can actually process the footage better. So let's go through and see what has happened. So we've got a result of smooth motion. You can go to no motion if you'd like, but the smoothness is at 50%. So if I play this back, you can see how smooth it is. Now if I were to change this back down to, let's say, about 10%, and we're going to let it restabilize that since we've made a settings adjustment, and when I move back here, you can see that it's still pretty smooth, but the camera kind of moves oddly around there. So now if I move it back up to 50%, we'll let it restabilize, and it's going to recache the frames if we play it back, so it's even smoother. Now you can see that it's cutting off the bottom part of the shot here, and the reason it's doing that is because it's doing this auto scale, so it's at 137%. When you pick the framing, there's a couple different options. You can stabilize the footage, you can stabilize and crop it, you can also stabilize, crop, and auto scale. Now what each one of these does is, if you stabilize only, when I go back here and I play it, it cuts everything out of the frame because it's working hard to stabilize the footage. It's trying to make the best out of everything in the pixel data. If I do stabilize and crop, it's cropped the video, but I've still got this border that's around. So it's actually stabilized it, but you've now got this border. Then if we look at stabilize, crop, and auto scale, that's going to take these edges and automatically push them out to the composition width and height there. So now we can see that it's stabilized the footage. If I want to see what it looks like without it, I can always click this effects button and play it back and see that's the original, and I can turn it back on. I can even turn it off and turn it on while it's playing back. But this is the warp stabilizer. If you've got a piece of footage that's just really not working well, you can go to this advanced section And there's a crop less or smooth motion. There's a detailed analysis that I would recommend that you try. So if you've done the analysis on here and it tries to stabilize and it just doesn't do quite what you're looking for, you can try to check this box and then it'll reanalyze the entire footage and see if you can get a better result. But like I said, it does better on some footage than others. You're not always able to get a smooth motion. And one other thing you want to watch out for is you can sometimes see in the background of your video that it'll start looking like things are warping because it's trying to analyze the footage and it's just not having a good time doing that. So let's go ahead and move on into our next effect in our effects section.